Glory to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God. Amen. Welcome to Uraho the Way Symposium on Barhebraeus as historian and exegete. Maphryono more Grigorios Barhebraeus. Yesterday was his commemoration, the Chrono, as per the Syriac Orthodox liturgical calendar. And as you know, he was the Maphryono, the post of the high priest of the Syriac Orthodox Church, second in rank only to the Patriarch of Antioch. Barhebraeus, the Syriac Orthodox genius of all times, and he was a Maphryono since 1264, and he was a poet, philosopher, grammarian, physician, biblical commentator, historian, and theologian, and the foremost representative of the Syriac Renaissance in the 12th and 13th century. What a wonderful life we have. We are celebrating today. A scholar par excellence. And many of his works like the world history, secular history, church history, the book of the storehouse of mysteries, the lamp of the sanctuary, book of rays, and many of the Indian viewers will be able to relate to the works of our beloved Kadavul Tirumeni and more Dionysius Grigorios Vattascheril. Their works are heavily rooted on the works of Barhebraeus. As we observe the commemoration, the Chrono of Barhebraeus, Uraho the Way is having this symposium on Barhebraeus, historian and exegete. May his prayers be a fortress for us, and we beseech the intercession of Barhebraeus. And let me introduce our resource person for today, Dr. Simone Pratelli. He is a scientific assistant at the Research Center of the Armenian Studies at the Department of History at Goethe University, Frankfurt, Germany. But he will be talking to us from Italy today because he is born and raised in Italy, and he did his Hebrew studies at Milan University. And then he switched from classical studies to Semitic studies, and he did his master's and PhD at Pisa University, Italy. He has his MA theology and his PhD, and then he is working on the critical edition of the Syriac Universal Chronicle by Barhebraeus, and he started this work since 2016. So how much heavily he is into this field and this subject, and he's on the translation of the works of Barhebraeus as well. So let me welcome Dr. Simone Pratelli to deliver his lecture on Barhebraeus, historian and exegete. Welcome, Dr. Pratelli.
Hello, thank you. Welcome to all present and connected. Thank you. I would like firstly to thank, in the persons of you, Dr. Matthew, and also of Dr. Chaco, for this invitation, and also all the personnel of the Uraho the Way platform for caring about my research and my work and asking me to say something about Barhebraeus as historian and exegete in my special case. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. So let me add your screen as well. Then the floor will be yours.
Yeah. Just tell me when you see what I see, and I can start.
It's
Just
all
be
good.
sure.
It's all good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so good morning to you, everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are at the moment following this presentation. I'm very glad to speak about Ebroyo, and I'm also quite moved because I'm expected today to speak about Ebroyo as historian and exegete. And so I would like firstly to give a sort of detail about my presentation. I have to limit my lecture as far as the historical works by Ebroyo are concerned, only to the chronography, which is the text I'm actually have been working on since 2016, as Father Matthew has already said. And so I'm speaking about the chronography as for Ebroyo writing history, and we will see what kind of history it is, and about the storehouse of mysteries, which is the most important exegetical work he wrote, as for the theological part of his works. So, as you can see in the summary, my intention, my aim today is to let you in these texts, in the chronography and in the storehouse of mysteries, in order to try together to understand how Ebroyo wished to organize his works, how he actually worked when writing his opera, and also to as the name of the platform of your ministry is Urho, the way, I would like this presentation to be an occasion also for you to tell me your observations, your considerations about how Ebroyo wished to root his works over the centuries up until the present day, when you are the people receiving his works. So you are his audience at the moment, and I would like to understand with you how his works have made their journey through the centuries and over time up to you in this case, who can maybe read one day his works. So my presentation will be always focused on the two texts, the Storehouse of Mysteries and the chronography, analyzing some details at each stage. I would like also to read some passages, short passages of his works, just, I repeat it once again, to let you in the text and let you understand who Ebroyo as an author was or tried to be. So I'm not telling you nothing about his life, because everything is very well known. I'm not discussing his education, his career in the church, in the Syriac Church, Western Syriac Church, in this case. And I also read the very, very good presentation on the platform of both his life and works. So I'm not telling you anything about the biographical information, which you can perfectly find in many, many publications. I wanted just to highlight a detail. There is a most important, essential, basic, and precious tool for anyone wanting to get to know the Syriac culture and the Syriac world, which is the gorgeous encyclopedic dictionary of the Syriac heritage, which has been also published online at the link that you see in this slide. It is named Encyclopedic Dictionary of the Syriac Heritage. And when thinking about this presentation and what I could tell about Ebroyo, I thought that this was a very good hint, and it was of help in my speech, because Ebroyo can be described as a most representative of the encyclopedic Syriac heritage. And this is the main point in discussing his figure as an author in Syriac literature, because also in the presentation you wrote on the website, you spoke about the originality of Ebroyo. Many scholars have discussed about this and wrote pages and pages trying to understand or to define the originality of Ebroyo. What I think is most important is rather his role in the Syriac literature and in Syriac culture. Originality can mean many things. It's a very wide term. I think that the originality of Ebroyo, if there is any, is his very role in the Syriac culture and literature as a scholar, and as his conscience of living in a particular moment in Syriac history, and somehow to have a role in transmitting all he could of Syriac cultural heritage, literary, scientific, and spiritual heritage to the following generations. So his originality might be simply his role, just his role. Well, I'm speaking about the Storehouse of Mysteries and the chronography, but firstly, I would like to tell you how you can access these texts. These texts, should you want to read them. One first and most important reference is not about his texts, but his works, his life, and you perfectly know this book. It is Barhebraeus, a biobibliography by Hidemi Takahashi. Everything you desire to know about Ebroyo is to be found here in this book, and especially because it is the basic step for each scientific research on the Ebroyo's works, especially as far as manuscripts are concerned, because in this book you also find a list of the manuscripts, existing manuscripts of all his works, where they are preserved and how they can be found. So this is a most important tool. And as far as the Storehouse Mysteries is concerned, which is the first work I'm speaking about today, there is, of course, an edition of the Syriac text of the whole Storehouse of Mysteries. It is now published by Gorgeous Press, and it was edited by More Julius Cicek in 2003. It is named here the Barn of Mysteries because Ausar, the term Ebroyo uses to define his work in the title, can be translated in many ways. Storehouse, barn, as you wish. So this is the Syriac whole edition of the Storehouse of Mysteries, but we also have translations, of course. Unfortunately, the Storehouse of Mysteries has never been translated as a whole. There are only partial translations. The first being this you can see on the left by Sprengling and Graham in 1931. This is the translation, the English translation and a facsimile edition of the Syriac text of just the first books from Genesis to Samuel, the second book of Samuel. So this is just the first section of the Storehouse of Mysteries, but it is a very complete English translation and also quite complicated. It is a very good book. It's a precious edition of the Storehouse of Mysteries, but just of the first books. Another most important monography on the Storehouse of Mysteries is this on the right-hand side of the slide by Assad Salma. And in this case, this is a critical edition with commentary and English translation of the following section after the books of Samuel, which is the books of Kings. So, and this is a very useful tool for me in my particular case, because it is a scientific publication, also considering the previous tradition, exegetical Syriac tradition, and trying to understand the relationship between Barhebraeus and the previous tradition as far as biblical exegesis is concerned. There are also other partial translations and reproductions of the Syriac text, not properly editions. These are the many Chicago dissertations, which are unfortunately unpublished, and these dissertations were defended in the very first decades of the 20th century. For example, this, I don't know if you can see anything, but I can try to widen the screen. This was dedicated to the scholia, because the Storehouse of Mysteries can also be described as a corpus of scholia, that is notes, marginal notes, observation commentaries to the Old and New Testament. And in this case, this is on Joshua and Judges. But there are many other Chicago dissertations on other books commented on by Barhebraeus. Unfortunately, I repeat it, these are unpublished. And lastly, there's my PhD dissertation, which was dedicated on the book of the 12 prophets, as commented by Barhebraeus in his Storehouse of Mysteries. Once again, my thesis is an introduction, critical text, and a translation in English of the section on the 12 prophets only. So, after this introduction on the monographies and publications, you can search for and you can find whenever you want, and should you wish someday to access directly the text, at least in translation, of course. I'm moving to the Universal Chronicles because I'm following both texts. We can and we must speak about chronicles written by Barhebraeus. He, of course, wrote both in Syriac and Arabic, and in the case of his chronicles, this is very true. He wrote the chronicle, generally defined and entitled like this, the Chronicle in Syriac, but he also wrote another important chronographical work in Arabic. The traditional Latin title is Historia Dynastiarum, and it is, well, a history of dynasties. I will explain this presently, what these dynasties are exactly. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that he wrote both in Syriac and Arabic his chronicles, and in the case of the Syriac Chronicle, it is divided into two parts, two main and important parts. The first being the chronography itself, which is a secular universal chronicle of the world from the creation up until his present days. And the second part is an ecclesiastical chronicle. He names it the ecclesiastical part in Syriac. It is named Chronicon Ecclesiasticum and Ecclesiastical Chronicle. I'm not speaking about the Ecclesiastical Chronicle and the Arabic history of dynasties, because these are not my research topic, but you can refer to the studies and translation, English translation by David Wilmshurst, and especially to the study, critical edition of the Syriac text and new English translation by Marianna Mazzola, as far as the Ecclesiastical Chronicle is concerned. So you can read in English the text and also the critically edited text in the edition by and translation by Marianna Mazzola. And as far as the Arabic Chronicle is concerned, I'm not aware of a complete new edition of the Arabic text, being this a critical edition. There is an edition, of course, but it is not updated and it is not a critical edition. Anyway, it has also a translation, but in Latin, if I'm not wrong. But Jean Fati and Laila Abdallah are working on the Arabic Chronicle by Barhebraeus, and Laila Abdallah, as far as I'm concerned, is preparing a translation of this text, maybe in English. So we can soon have a translation in a modern language also of the Arabic Chronicle by Barhebraeus. As far as the chronography, which is my text, is concerned, we have, of course, an edition. The most important is a Bejan edition published in 1890 of the Syriac text. And this is the reference edition also for my work. But there is also another edition, once again edited by Julius Cicek and written by Barsoum, handwritten, copied by Barsoum. It was published in 1987, and this is another edition of the Syriac text of the whole chronography, published by Gorgeous Press once again. We have also translations, of course. The first in English was by Baj, published in 1932 in 2 volumes, including also a facsimile of 1 manuscript of the chronography. This translation is most useful because it provides a direct access to the text, but it must be freshened up somehow because it's quite old-fashioned. There is also a French translation by Philippe Talon. It was published in 3 volumes in 1215. This is just a translation of the chronography in French, so there is no facsimile edition of any kind of the Syriac text. I'm working on these translations in order to accomplish my project. And as far the project is concerned, I would just like to tell you about, I'm working on a critical edition with English translation of the chronography. The project started in 2016, and it is now hosted at Frankfurt University. under the supervision of Professor Dr. Dorothea Welteke. This is my work at the moment. I hope to finish it soon, but it's not that simple, and I will try to give you a sample of it. So, as for the structure and features, going back to the Storehouse of Mysteries, it was composed probably around 1271, 1272, maybe in Maragha, but we are not sure about that. Maybe Ebroyo was in Maragha at that time, but it is not so sure. The structure, the Storehouse of Mysteries is a commentary, a whole commentary on the Syriac scriptures, both the ancient Old Testament and the New Testament. And in the case of the Storehouse of Mysteries, and that is quite important, as you can read, there is no indication of either chapters or verses as we are used to nowadays, because the biblical text is not divided into chapters or verses, but in portions of text, maybe corresponding to biblical pericopes, but once again, this is not that sure. In any case, Ebroyo always writes the number of total portions included in each biblical book, and this is quite interesting. Main features of the Storehouse of Mysteries, main general features, of course. The style, the Syriac language and the style Ebroyo uses in this work is quite synthetic and broken. And this is important because Ebroyo was a polymath and a scholar managing and working on many texts and languages. And the language and style of his works changes from work to work. In the case of the Storehouse of Mysteries, is synthetic and broken as far as the style is concerned. The language is bare and blunt, and this means that it is not that easy to understand what Ebroyo says in many passages, and consequently is not that easy to translate these passages. The exposition is essential and frequently elliptical. And as a whole, the Storehouse of Mysteries cannot be defined as an organic and consistent treatise, but rather a repertoire of hermeneutic samples. And this is very important to understand how the Storehouse of Mysteries is structured and how Ebroyo worked when writing the Storehouse of Mysteries. Of course, as a consequence, there is no apparent systematicity as in the Storehouse of Mysteries. On the other hand, the chronography was composed in around 1272, 1276, and the compilation of the work ended with Ebroyo's death, of course, in 1286. Once again, maybe he was in Maragha when writing the text, but we're not sure. Also in the case of the chronography. And the structure of this work, and we come back to the word dynasties we saw in the Arabic title of his Arabic chronicle. The chronography is structured as a succession of 11 generations, eubole in Syriac, dynasties, genealogies. The translations can be many. He starts with the biblical patriarchs, moves to the judges, biblical judges, to the biblical kings, then moves to the Babylonian kings, to the Medes, to the Persian kings, to the Greeks, to the ancient Greeks, of course, to the Romans, then to the Byzantines, to the Arabs, and closes the work with the Huns at his own time, of course. So he follows the succession of ruling generations, ruling dynasties. This is the most important issue and feature of the chronography. This is anyway a composite work, because Ebroyo wrote the chronography until his death, but it was continued by his brother Barsalmo Safi up until 1297. And after this work, there are also further anonymous continuations up until the late 15th century. And this is true also for the Ecclesiastical Chronicle, which has also its own continuations, and which is also structured as a succession of role figures. In the case of the Ecclesiastical Chronicle is a history of the Syriac churches of the West in the first part of the Ecclesiastical Chronicle, following the succession of the Patriarchs of Antioch. And in the second part, a history of the Church of the East, or better, a history of the Syriac churches in the Eastern countries, as it follows the successions of both Maphryones of the East and the Church of the East Patriarchs. So the same structure of succession of most important figures is followed also in the Ecclesiastical Chronicle. The main features of the chronography, in this case, the style changes because it is very analytical and lavish. It is the prose Ebroyo uses in the chronography is plain and relatively loose. Is not that easy to translate the chronography to. For this reason, the language is quite complex. The narrative follows the succession of years, but this is not always true. It depends on the section we're in when reading the chronography. It is a continuous annual narrative, although with a dense, layered, and not always transparent texture. For example, this is very true as for dating and the sources used by Ebroyo are concerned. It is also very rich in anecdotes, excursus, and mirabilia. Maybe we'll see something about this. The intent in the chronography, opposite to the Storehouse of Mysteries, is quite exhaustive. His aim is to write down an exhaustive work. So I would like now to let you in the text, as I said at the beginning of the speech, reading with you the proem of the Storehouse of Mysteries. I will read it and just give some details, make some observations to let you understand how Ebroyo envisaged his work. So the very beginning, this is the translation by Graham Sprengling, the edition of the first books of the commentary I showed you previously. So there is an opening section with the title, "Calling upon the help of God for the assistance of my weakness, I begin to write the book of the Storehouse of Mysteries." Here we have the title of the work, "On the interpretation of the whole text of the Bible, of the works of our Father, His Beatitude, Mar Grigorios II, Maphryono of the East, renowned in God. Our Lord help me." This is a very common formula in the opening section of manuscript works. Then we have the proem written by Ebroyo. So here with the proem starts the text by Ebroyo. And it starts, as always, with an invocation to thee, who hast suspended the earth above the waters, and hast confined the waters above the heaven, let every knee bow. And from that which is thine, let every good gift at every step flow, because thou art God alone, and not one of those that were beside thee. Thy word hath set a limit for the peoples, and thy spirit the seas have stood firm in the deep. Man in the very beauty of thy majesty thou hast fashioned, and the soul by means of reason, the light of thy goodness, thou hast invigorated, especially of those who have devoted themselves to the divine writings and have healed unhealthy minds by their divine teachings. This is a quite long and complicated invocation. I just wanted you to pay attention, because in this particular invocation, Ebroyo is already speaking about the creation. So this is not just a general invocation to God, but an invocation focused on the contents of the text he is approaching to write. And he's starting from the creation. So the theological intent, the prayer intent, and the literary intent are perfectly interwoven in this invocation. Then Ebroyo starts with the reasons of writing the Stories of Mysteries. And this is important for, I hope this is important for you to understand the meaning he bestowed on his works. So he says, now, since some have expounded the ideas, some have correctly set forth the words, others have composed chronicles, and still others have preferred to write lexicons, it has appeared useful to me that by this labor, for the time being, the seed of all the meanings of the whole text of the Bible in the soil of this little treatise I should implant, and that I should earn abiding gain for myself and for others. Because many books are not for all men obtainable, neither cannot be told, and the few must bend the back to the burden of the weight, while the multitude of swallows must nest in their shelters. Now, inasmuch as this version, the Peshitta, is in accord with the Hebrew, and as Eusebius the Caesarean says, Origen found it even with a certain widow, it is in the hands of the Syrians in every place. It, although defective, I have made the foundation, and from the versions of the Greeks, which is that of the 72, I have adduced many readings, of course, for supplementing of this. And though not for support, yet for enlightenment, I have used those of Aquila and Symmachus, and of Theodotion, and of the fifth and the sixth. Well, it is very complicated. I'm just telling you giving you some information to orientate. Firstly, he explains the meaning of his works, of the Storehouse of Mysteries. And he is thinking about his future, the future of his work, and also about the utility and use future generations, the others, can make of this work. Then he starts speaking about his sources. Ebroyo sources is a most important issue in studies dedicated on this author. Of course, he starts from the Peshitta, but he speaks also about the Hebrew version, and then names directly his sources, Eusebius of Caesarea and Origen, first of all. Why? Because he uses, as you can see in this slide, he uses the version of the Greeks, which is that of the 72. This is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which was attributed to 7 sages who wrote it directly and separately from the Hebrew original. So he is speaking about the Peshito version, the Syriac version of the text, but he also wants to go back to the Hebrew version using as a model Eusebius and using Origen too as a model, because when he speaks in this case about the readings of Aquila, Symmachus, Theodotion, these are all Greek translations of the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, which Origen in the 3rd century, in the 3rd century, collected in his Hexapla, which was sixfold. The translation could be sixfold edition of the Old Testament, just juxtaposing in columns the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, a transcription of the Hebrew text in Greek letters, and the translations by Aquila, Symmachus, and Theodotion. So this was a sort of huge critical edition of the Old Testament, and this edition was so important that also Barhebraeus, when writing the Storehouse of Mysteries, is quoting it. In this particular case, he is also quoting the version of the Greeks, which is that of the 72, that is the Septuaginta, of course. But I have to add that I had just a technical problem. Now it's all right. Sorry. In the case of the Greek version, Barhebraeus is using the Syriac translation of the Greek of the Septuaginta, not directly the Septuaginta. This Syriac edition translation, was of course the Syro Hexapla version of the Septuaginta. So when he speaks about the Greek text, he is referring to the Syriac translation of the Septuagint, Greek version of the Old Testament. Well, he goes on with the features of the Syriac version in the special excursus and details on the Syriac version of the Old Testament. Now, concerning this Syriac, there are 3 opinions. One, that is what brought out in the time of the Kings Solomon and Hiram. Second, that Asa the priest translated it when the Assyrians sent him to Samaria. Third, that in the days of Adai the apostle and Abgar, king of Edessa, the version was made, when also the New Testament in like manner, crudely, the Peshito, was translated. Afterward, a second time it was translated more elegantly from the Greek to the Syriac in the city of Mapur in the days of the pious Philoxenus, and it was revised a third time in Alexandria by Saint Thomas of Heraclea in the holy monastery of the Antonians. The Septuagintal Old Testament, however, Paul, Bishop of Tella of Mausalat, translated from Greek to Syriac. This section, with this last section of the poem, is dedicated to the origins, legendary origins of the Peshitta, the Syriac version of the text, which is the basis for Barhebraeus in his work. But he also quotes the Syriac revisions of the Greek text of the New Testament, in this case, by Philoxenus of Mabur and by Thomas of Heraclea, that is the Heraclean version of the Herculean Syriac version of the New Testament. So this is just a presentation of the work directly from the words of Barhebraeus. In this slide, I'm just showing you how the edition by Graham Sprengling is structured. You have a photographic reproduction of the most ancient manuscript of the Storehouse of Mysteries. You can see it on the left. And then you have a collation notes apparatus, which is a collection of all the variants and different readings that can be found in the manuscripts, in the many manuscripts of the Storehouse of Mysteries. This is just, this slide is just to show you how my job works and is developed as a philologist. Well, as far as the chronography is concerned, once again, I would like to read with you the presentation of this work. Okay, I try to enlarge the text. Once again, I would like you to understand how Barhebraeus organized his works, and how what meaning he gave to his works, in this case of the chronography. So the book of the Chronicle of Generations of Kings, here in the translation by Budge that I showed you before. Once again, we have an invocation. We, invoking the help of the Holy Trinity, Father and Son and Holy Spirit, one veritable God, begin to write the book of the Chronicle of the Generations of Kings, which was composed by Mar Gregory, in this case, the Maphryono, the light of the East and of the West, who is al-Faraj, the son of Aaron, the physician, who came from the city of Melitene, who is commonly called Ebroyo, the son of the Hebrew. Invocation, as in the case of the Storehouse of Mysteries. Then we have the preface written from here on by Ebroyo himself. God, help my feebleness. Blessed be thou, Lord, and Lord of the universe, the beginning and the end. Thou art the first, and thou art the last. With thee every course of action is prepared, and unto thee all praise is rightfully due. And to the Son, the Word, the strength of thy wisdom, and to the Holy Spirit, the life of thy being, from everlasting and now and forever. Invocation quite classic, I can say. Then once again, Barhebraeus explains us why he composed the chronography. And as this our rational being was created, so that it might know righteousness, so that it might glorify it, and goodness that it might find it, and as knowledge in the first place becomes rich through thoughts of a theoretical nature, and it in the second place profiteth through practical hearings, the calling to remembrance of the things, both good and bad, which have happened in each and every generation, conferreth no small benefit on all those who care greatly to acquire what is good, and who take pains to hate what is bad. And it urgeth a man to demonstrate pointedly the things which are excellent related thereby, and inciteth him to reject the disgraceful happenings which it narrates. You can see from these lines how complex is the style by Barhebraeus. Well, I need, of course, to remember once again that this is the translation by Budge, and also on the orthographical point of view, it is quite old-fashioned, and it must be refreshed in some way. In any case, I can assure you that also the Syriac text of the proem, of the preface of the chronography, is very complicated, is very complex. And then we can move forward with the explanation and the reason, the very reason for writing the chronography. For a period of 80 years, well, I just want you also to check on this. In these lines that we have already read, there is once again a very intellectual explanation of the meaning of the work. In the Storehouse of Mysteries, we saw that the creation was intermingled with the prayer to God. In this case, there is moral reflection on the importance of remembering things and transmitting them to the following generations. So there is always moral, psychological, ethical, theological explanation directly given by Ebroyo in the prefaces of his works. Then he explains the reasons. So, for a period of 80 years, none of our people have given any thought to this object, and to the doings of this, none of our people, of course, is the Syriac people, has devoted himself thereto. That is to say, from the time of the blessed and old man Michael, the deceased patriarch, who is Michael the Great, of course, who compiled that great threefold historical chronography, and to the information afforded by the old and antiquated historical chronography of Eusebius. Once again, we see his sources. He is directly naming his sources. Eusebius, I mean him of Caesarea, and Socrates, the scholastic, and Zachariah, the rhetorician, and John of Asia, and Dionysius of Telmachre, together with what himself quickened. It hath seemed to me, please look at this formula, it hath seemed to me, it has seemed to me. We have found it, the very same formula, also in the preface to the Storehouse of Mysteries. It hath seemed to me that a similar breach and a gap which inviteth filling exists in respect of us and our people, and that the famous events in the affairs of the world and also in those of the church which have happened in the period which precedes us, which will fall into oblivion and be no longer found in our own times after the lapse of much time, will be sought for. Therefore, according to what time hath brought, I, having entered the library of the city of Maraga of Azerbaijan, one important piece of information, where he is and what tools he used, the library of Maraga. I have loaded up this, my little work, with narratives which are worthy of remembrance from many volumes of the Syrians, Saracens, and Persians, which are preserved here, that is, in the library in Maraga. And those which concerned the government of the world, I have set in order from the Patriarch, the first of whom was Adam, and from them I proceeded to the judges of the Hebrews. Just let me move to the following slide. Okay, then to their kings, then to the Chaldeans, then to the Medes, then to the Persians, then to the pagan Greeks, then to the Romae, the Byzantines, then to the Christian Greeks, then to the Arabs, and then conclude with the Huns, who live in our own days, order after order. Order after order is what I explained before concerning the generations, the dynasties, order after order. And these I have committed to the first part of the chronography. In the matter of ecclesiastical affairs, I have begun with Aaron, the first high priest, and as I end, to those who stand at the head today in the second part of the ecclesiastical history. This last I have sealed in two discourses. The first treatise of the Western high priesthood, which is of Antioch, and the second treatise of our own Eastern high priesthood. So it was quite longish, but I hope that this helps you to understand the style of Barhebraeus, his language, the complexity of arguments, of sources, and also of aims and meanings he bestowed on his works. This is for the preface, the introduction of his works. And once again, I'm showing you a photo from one of the manuscripts transmitting the chronography. This manuscript is from the monastery of Saint Mark in Jerusalem. And this just another sip, another taste of my work as a philologist, using manuscripts directly in order to prepare a critical edition. So, if you have an idea now of the style, language, and complexity, intellectual and spiritual also complexity of Barhebraeus works, of course, I'm speaking always about the Storehouse of Mysteries and the chronography. I would just read some short passages from the beginning of the real commentary on the Bible, in the case of the Storehouse of Mysteries, so immediately after the preface. And in this case is just a sip for you to understand what reading the Storehouse of Mysteries means. So it starts with the Book of the Law, of course, with the 5 books. The first book of the creation with, and this is what I said about the sections, the portions, the biblical pericopes. We are not sure about the meaning of the word schocho he uses, 34 sections. So the book of creation includes 34 sections. First section with 6 paragraphs. So here you find and you see the complexity of the structure. There are no chapters, there are no verse numbers, which are here integrated by Graham and Sprengling, but you cannot find them in the manuscripts of the Syriac text. There are just sections. So he is commenting on Genesis, the first verse. In the beginning, God created. This is the text of the Peshitta he is explaining. That is, in the beginning, God created means in the primordial beginning. And therefore, not with O of R, but with I of it. It should be read. I'm explaining it immediately. In this case, Barhebraeus is giving us a grammatical, but mainly better, phonological, phonetical detail about the pronunciation of the word brisho. In the beginning, in Syriac, is brisho. He is telling us that the word is to be pronounced brisho with E vowel and not with O vowel, because maybe there was at the time of Barhebraeus another different pronunciation of the word, sorry, which was brosho, something like that. The concern of Barhebraeus is, in this case, linguistical, phonetic. The word brisho is to be read brisho with vowel E after R, brisho, not vowel O, brosho. I hope this is clear. It is not clear reading the text because, as I said before, the style is very elliptical, telegraphic. This is a grammatical note. Then he goes on, and that as to that which is in the gospel again, even though it signified the beginning, yet it indicates the eternal preexistence of the Word with God the Father, but not so this that God created. Once again, it is very complicated when reading it, because you ask yourselves, what is he talking about? Because it is elliptical. In this case, he is comparing the first verse of Genesis to the first verse of the Gospel of John. In the beginning, light was created, and so forth. He is comparing these two verses, and he is explaining, that the beginning has a special meaning, which is related to the pre-existence of the Word with God the Father, the Word which is named in the very first verse of the Gospel of John. It has nothing to do with the creation, which is the focus of the first verse of Genesis. So he's comparing the two verses, and he's giving us the theological sense of the two verses, different verses of two different texts in the scriptures, starting from the literal text itself. Once again, then we have a grammatical note, Yoth the heaven and Yoth the earth. That is the substance of the heaven and the earth. But Yoth takes the place of le, the preposition in Palestinian usage. That is lashmayo wal ar'o. Once again, this is a grammatical observation. He's speaking about the particle which introduces, in the case of the gospel, in the case of the creation of Genesis, the sky and the earth in Syriac are introduced normally by a preposition which is properly an affix, which is le. Le, the preposition that you see here, introduces the object in Syriac phrases, in Syriac sentences. In the case of the Peshito he is using and commenting on, there is not a preposition le, but there is yoth, which is similar to Hebrew et. And he explains this difference from classical Syriac as a geographical linguistic detail of the Palestinian usage of the Aramaic spoken and written in Palestine. So this is just a sample of the difficult structure of the storehouse of mysteries, the difficult language Ebroyo uses, and the how can I say, the challenge this text presents us with when we try to read it and to understand it. I'm not going onward because I know that this is quite complicated. I just wanted you to understand how Ebroyo works, or better worked, at his time when commenting on the biblical text. There is another passage. In this case, this is taken from the section of the 12 prophets. I'm just reading the very first lines because this is quite interesting. About the prophecies of Obadiah, he opens the section on Obadiah by telling us something about him. He was from the land of Shachim. He himself was the head of the 50 men who Elijah had pity of, and went with him in the presence of Ahab. Then he persuaded Elijah and was educated by him. Moreover, his wife is the very woman who came to Cilicia and spoke on the part of her 2 sons, who were being sought because of the debt that had grown upon the father, for having nourished the 100 prophets he had concealed from Jezebel. It is quite complicated as the biblical references and episodes are concerned. The text is quoting many biblical episodes. What I want you to pay your attention to here is that Ebroyo is one of the few and most important sources for an apocryphal text, which is that of the lives of the prophets. The lives of the prophets, the apocryphal lives of the prophets, are not, of course, as an apocryphal work in the scriptures, but they have strong and rich transmission and tradition in many languages. The Syriac tradition of the lives of the prophets is also represented by Ebroyo himself, who is an important source for these texts. The commentary on the prophets, also on the major prophets, is always preceded by biographical informations taken from the apocryphal lives of the prophets. So this is just another detail that can give you the importance of Ebroyo. In this case, we know about the Syriac text also of the lives of the prophets through the Storehouse of Mysteries, as Ebroyo directly quotes this text. He never speaks about the apocryphal books with the lives of the prophets. This must be clear. But he uses these texts, so he knows the work and uses and integrates it in his commentary. Just a very short reading from the chronography, once again to let you know how Ebroyo worked and wrote his work, in this case, the chronography. The chronography, of course, starts with the biblical patriarchs. So the patriarchs from Adam to Moses. These are the Syriac titles we also find in the manuscripts. The first series of generations, which begins with the patriarchs. And Ebroyo starts ex abrupto. Adam, the first man, the king of those who are on earth, according to the opinion of the divine book, was created on Friday, the 6th day of the month of Nisan, the first month of the year 1 of the existence of the world, which began on the first day of the week, the first day of the month of Nisan. This is just the very beginning of the chronography is dense with chronographical and dating details. And this is one of the great difficulties of this text, because of course chronology and dates, years, indication of years, months and days is mostly important in a chronographical work. And Ebroyo immediately gives us many details. Then he quotes Anianos, which is who is one of his sources, Anianos the monk, quoting the book of Enoch. I'm not reading it in detail because I don't want you to get confused. I just want you to understand that for Barhebraeus, it is not only important to give, in this case, chronological information, as in the case of the Storehouse of Mysteries, quoting biblical verses and giving an interpretation of them, but also relying on sources that can confirm or disconfirm observations, comments, and also data given by, in this case, by the biblical text, because he is speaking about the patriarchs. The problem of sources is huge in the case of Barhebraeus. Anyway, after Adam, you can see at the following paragraph, after Adam came Seth, his son. In the time of Seth, when his sons remembered the blessed life which they had led in paradise, they went up into the mountain of Hermon, and there they led a chaste and holy life, being remote from carnal intercourse or marriage. And yes, the Syriac word can be translated as intercourse or marriage. And for this reason, they were called Hire, watchers, sons of Elohim. Now Seth, being 205 years old, begot Enosh, and all the years Seth lived was 912 years. This sample is taken for you because it shows you how Barhebraeus structured his commentary when speaking about the patriarchs. He speaks about the patriarch, he of course names him, then relies on sources, and at the end of each paragraph always gives the number of total years lived by the patriarch himself. This structure repeats itself all over the work in the section of the patriarchs, of course. Just another example from a completely different section of the chronography. In this case, we are in the generation of the Arabs. I read it because, and now you can see why I chose it. The kings of the Arabs. Here begins the 10th series, which passeth from the Greek Ionian kings to the Arab kings. So the Syriac titles always tell you where you are at the beginning of each new section, of each new generation. After the 12 years of the reign of Heraclius, Muhammad began to be famous, and moreover, the era of the lunar month of the Tayoye, the Arabs, began with this year, which is the 6,130th year from Adam, and the 933rd year of the Greeks, Yaunoye, and the 624th year of the era of our Redeemer. I chose this passage not to get you confused once again, but just to make you understand that Barhebraeus uses many different chronological systems in the chronography. He uses the era of our Redeemer, of course, but also uses the Greek era, that is the Seleucid counting of years. And in this case, he is also using the Hijra counting of years, so the Muslim chronological tradition. This is very important because paragraph after paragraph, as long as Barhebraeus uses either the Greek era to date events or the Arab era or another different system, we can have maybe some hints about the sources he is using, because the system, the counting of years in the chronography is not consistent. In the case of the patriarchs, for example, he never gives an exact year. He only gives the succession of the patriarchs and the total years each lived, as I have already said. In the case of the Arab kings, he frequently uses the Arab system of counting the years, but also the Seleucid system. Sometimes you find only the Seleucid and not the Arab, some other the opposite. And this is extremely useful for us when trying to understand from what chronicler or historiographer Barhebraeus took a particular passage for his work. This slide, I'm not reading it in full because I don't want to be heavy about the text. I chose this this passage always from the 10th generation, which is on the Arabs, just to show you the path followed by Barhebraeus in telling history, in writing history. Generally, the paragraphs always start with an year indication, and in the year 1220 of the Greeks. So here you can find the Seleucid indication of the year. A great snowfall took place in Baghdad, and the snow lay 4 fingers deep on the roofs. And at that time there was no man in Baghdad that had ever seen snow before. And after 18 years, in the year 315 of the Arabs. So here is not using the Greek era system, but the Arab one, which is the year 1238 of the Greeks. In this case, he converts the chronological information also in Seleucid numbers. There was a very bitterly cold winter again in Baghdad. It was so cold that the wine in the cellars and eggs and oils froze and the trees withered. And in that year, Munis, the eunuch, with an army of Arabs, attacked the country of the Romae from the citadel of Melitene, and he took captives and looted and went away. This passage can be of some interest because in this case, apart from the very last piece of information, Barhebraeus is not giving proper historical information. He's speaking about meteorological phenomena, and you have to understand that this is very frequent in the chronography. Barhebraeus frequently quotes meteorological events, strange phenomena. Once again, we can read the following passage. And in the year 300 of the Arabs, which is the year 1224 of the Greeks, once again we have a correspondence, a conversion better, there appeared a dwarf woman who gave birth to a child, and many saw her in the country of Outer India. And in this year, Alexander, the king of the Romae, died, and his son Constantine reigned after him when he was 12 years old. Once again, the very last piece of information is properly historical, but the first is definitely not. He is reporting a special event, a strange event, episode. There again in the following passage, and in the year 1227 of the Greeks, and in this case we do not have any conversion in the Arab Hijra system, One army of the Romae went out to Tarsus and another to Mar-Ash, and they made captives of the Arabs about 50,000 souls. And there was great mourning about the Arabs in every place. And in this year, the Nestorian metropolitan of Dakuka became a Muslim in Baghdad, and the Christians grieved sorely. So this is just a sample of the path and the structure Barhebraeus gave to the telling of history and the reporting of historical, but as you have seen, not always only historical information and data in the chronography. I think that I can conclude now, because maybe you are very tired after this presentation. And as for the conclusions, I'm repeating what I said at the beginning. I would like to hear from you whenever you want, and if you feel to do that, of course. How are your conclusions? How can you get nowadays the message, if any, by Barhebraeus through his quite complicated, I know, works such as the chronography and the Storehouse of Mysteries? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simone. This was a great presentation, and we are enticed by the work that you are going, you have taken up, and you are continuing your mission. So this is amazing. So I'm not sure whether anywhere else in the world any other works are being done on Barhebraeus. Just out of curiosity, I'm asking. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dr.
I can hear you. I don't know about the other connected.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, all right. So again, I wanna. This is my curiosity.
Yeah.
So, in the year of Arabs, like it's like 300 years, and it has a mention of outer India. I know that you are, history is not. I mean, in geography is maybe something outside your scope of study. But was there any reflection, like what was the political or geographical border of India? I mean, just out of like, what was this outer India? Any?
Yeah. You're right. Well, actually, I can't answer your question properly, because I was quite perplexed too when reading this indication. I really don't know, because there is no comment, as far as I remember, in the translation by Baj about this geographical indication. I don't know, because actually I really don't remember how many times India is named in the chronography, actually. And this should be also something of interest. Actually, I don't know. When reading the text, I don't remember about an explanation of the geography of India, but I'm not that sure. I should check the Syriac text by Barhebraeus himself. Maybe the Syriac is more clear, but I'm not sure. I can't answer. It's very strange. You're right. Not strange, but it should be explained. Yes. Even because I don't know what is inner India for Barhebraeus.
Yeah, I mean, this was in the first century. So what was India like? I'm just asking out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing that I would like to reflect upon is um, the the book of law, the first book of creation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this may not be in the first section, but um, I have read something like there was a mention on Ruho,
Yeah.
um, the wind of God.
Mm-hmm.
There was a controversy. We cannot say controversy, but there were different school of thought, like
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
like more Jacob of Sarug and
Mm-hmm.
Theodore of the Nestorians. They all
Yeah.
thought, they all interpreted that as the created wind,
Mm-hmm.
but more aframe, and Barhebraeus is the one who emphatically said it's not wind, it's not the created wind, it is the Spirit of the Lord. And
Yeah.
this interpretation is again reflected in the current exegesis. Like, if you read the modern ones, the modern ones have the interpretation, the classic interpretation, unlike
Mm-hmm.
or Jacob of Sarug or Theodore. So it's the wind of the Lord. And
Mm-hmm.
Barhebraeus is emphatically stating and why he comes to the conclusion that Moses is referring to the Spirit of the Lord. So these are
Mm-hmm.
interesting things. We look forward to more publication and more
Yeah.
theological interpretation, which we can rely upon, the wisdom.
Mm. Yeah.
So just a comment.
Yeah. But maybe there's something about this, because in the slide I didn't read that that is this one. Maybe there's some further discussion about the Spirit, because yes, he's speaking about the darkness, of course, but then starts a very long explanation about the um, the Spirit of God. Yes, and the Spirit of God. If you see my pointer, I don't know if you can
Yeah,
see it.
I can see that. Like, Spirit of
Okay.
God was brooding upon the face
Yeah.
of others. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Barhebraeus starts uh, reporting the various interpretations. That is, the great Basilius of Caesarea, he's the Basilius of Caesarea, understood it to be the Holy Spirit, who in the beginning instilled life into the waters, and at the end he will instill it into the dust. And he quotes Basilius, I think, "Thou sendest thy spirit, and they are created." But Morefrem understood it to be the air, and he rests his opinion upon this fact, that the context here is concerned with the created things and not with the persons of the deity. So this is something about about what you were speaking about. It's very complicated. I'm not a specialist on, of course, on theological explanation of the biblical text, but you have an example here of the difficulty to understand what the Spirit of God
Yeah.
was.
So I believe the one that I remember reading. So it's more, it's about the Spirit of God is brooding over the
Yeah.
creation, so that there is life, there is going to be
Yeah.
life. And so those kind of explanations are more close to modern exegesis, modern
Yeah.
interpretation as well. So it's important to take up Ebroyo very
Yeah.
seriously in this contemporary world, and he has
Yeah.
a very interesting interpretation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you like to have any final comments? Like, we have been spending like an hour and a half. This was a wonderful lecture, and this throws a lot of light and enlightenment to the research that's going on, and give an overview of the works of Barhebraeus. So you have any final comments? Otherwise, we can, yeah, go ahead.
Well, firstly, I hope not to have burdened you of a heavy amount of information, because I know that these texts are complicated. I didn't want you to get confused, and I hope that you are not confused or disoriented. I preferred to show you the text directly, because Barhebraeus had a special way to conceive his works and to write them down. So if we want to understand Barhebraeus and to understand his originality, so as a conclusion I could speak about this, his originality, his role, we of course need to get to know his texts. The chronography and the storehouse of mysteries are just two of the many, of course. But they are, I think, quite important as examples, because they are completely different one from the other, in the style, in the language, in the use of sources. About the sources, Barhebraeus used many sources we simply don't know about anything, but he nevertheless named many other of his sources. I showed it, I tried to show it in the presentation, and he used it very freely. He quotes them. The problem is also about what text of these sources he actually read at his time, in what language. He quotes the Greek fathers, but he almost surely didn't know any Greek. So what version of these Greek fathers did he read, for example? Also the Hebrew version, when he speaks about the Hebrew version of the Bible, I don't think that Barhebraeus knew any Hebrew. He was helped by someone who allowed him to access the Hebrew text, or used other sources he simply doesn't name. So the originality of Barhebraeus, I think, lies in the difficulty to understand him. Even this is a paradox, but he comes in a very special moment of Syriac history, intellectual and political history, and the works he writes are each an example of what Syriac culture can offer to the following generations. And this is important. As a way of conclusion, I would like to stress this. Barhebraeus always had in mind his audience, the future readers of his works. This is why I used the prefaces, because the prefaces to Barhebraeus' works are extremely important to understand his role.
God help me, my feebleness. What a beautiful preface to start with.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to start using those kind of prefaces before we speak about anything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Such an intellectual giant, such a wisdom, such an encyclopedia, but he started with God help me, my feebleness.
Yeah.
So,
this is very common in Syriac tradition. Not, of course, it is not only in Barhebraeus that we can read this, but in any case, there is always an invocation to God, because he was very well aware that his work, even if he is speaking about a little work, was not little at all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simone Pratelli, for this wonderful lecture. We'll continue this discussion maybe at a later point. So I hope and pray that your work will be completed pretty soon. I know it's complex, it's time consuming, but we look forward to the final product so that we can grab your work and start imbibing the great wisdom that is being shared and inspired by the Holy Spirit. And we thank God for all the works that you are doing as well, and continue to pray for your work and your ministry as well. So thank you so much. Before we get to those who are in India, if you would like to read the works of Barhebraeus, there are a few books. One of the thing is one, as I mentioned, that by More Ignatius Grigorios Watasheril. This is being published by More Adai Study Center. Quintessence of religious doctrines, and you need to grab the classic one without much addition or distortions. This is heavily depending upon the works of Barhebraeus. You can get a taste of what Barhebraeus' work looked like. I mean, this is for the audience in India. Sarangal, if you can just get an unedited, a classic one, that will help. So all glory to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God. And thank you, Dr. Simone Pratelli, for this wonderful session and time. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye.